Good day, students. Welcome. It's class time. Watch lessons on Television Jamaica, TVJ's YouTube channel, or on One Spot Media. We also are live on gojamaica.com. If you have questions on today's subjects, send them on to Television Jamaica's Facebook page at Television Jamaica or on Instagram at television_Jamaica or use the hashtag TVJClassTime. I am Gail Winter Farquharson, and I will be guiding you through CSEC Agricultural Science. This week, we are going to look at supply and demand. Let's start our lesson. So today's lesson, we'll be looking at supply and demand and how it impacts pricing in the market space. Today's objectives are: 1, to define the terms demand and supply. 2, explain the law of demand and supply. Discuss factors that influence demand and supply. Determine the relationship between demand, supply, and pricing. And 5, explain the concept equilibrium. Let's dig in. Here we have two images. On your left, we have an image that represents tomatoes in March. On your right, tomatoes current time, December. So in March, the cost for tomatoes was actually $30 per pound. Currently, the price for tomato is actually, can anybody guess? $400 per pound. Yes, $400 per pound for tomatoes. Now, what has influenced the change in price is what we call demand versus supply. So there's an increase in price for tomatoes by $370. Now, let's dig further. Let's picture the market space as the scale. On our left, we have an image that represents production. Production is what we talk about as, or we could refer to as, supply. Supply speaks on the seller's point of view. So notes that will be taken today, we will be looking on the impact of these from the seller's point of view. Then we look at the right side of our scale today, which looks on demand. Demand speaks to consumption, and this will be taken from the buyer's viewpoint. Now, let's break them down. What is demand? Demand is the principle referring to a consumer's desire to purchase goods and the willingness to pay a price for a specific good at a given time. So it's the ability of the consumers to purchase items at various prices at specific point. And again, demand leads or goes hand in hand with consumption. Next, supply. What is supply? Supply is a concept that describes the total amount of specific good that the producer makes available to consumers at specific price over a period of time. So this is the amount of good that the seller can present to the market space that consumers can purchase at a particular price at a particular point. Now, how does pricing impact supply? How does it impact demand? We look at what we call the laws. So let's look at the first one, which is the law of demand. The law of demand. The law of demand states that a high price will lead to a low quantity demanded, and the reverse. A low price would lead to a high quantity demanded. Let's look at tomato, right? So if the price for tomato increases, the amount that will be demanded will be reduced. Because, being realistic, if the price for something goes up, if you normally would buy, let's say, 5 pounds of tomato, this week you'll buy 3 because there's an increase in price. And if the price actually falls, you'll buy more. Practical, right? So the law states that the increase in price would actually cause a reduction in the amount of items that is demanded. Let's look how price impacts supply. That is called the law of supply. So let's look back at tomatoes again so you can better understand. Now, the law of supply states that a higher price leads to a greater quantity supplied, and that a lower price, which is the reverse, leads to a lower quantity that is supplied. So, tomatoes again, right? So let's say the price for tomatoes has increased. Now, this would lead to an increase in supply, because from an economic standpoint, if you're a supplier and you realize that, you know what, the cost for tomato is now $400, I'm going to increase the amount of tomatoes that I supply in the market space. But if the price reduces, more than likely you're going to pull back on the amount. And to actually satisfy this, I mean, some farmers normally turn to other ventures to say, here, when I have too much tomatoes, so I'm going to actually sell these tomatoes to maybe factories to create tomato paste. Understand? Because it costs to actually store these items and to secure these items. So to store them would actually be a greater cost in comparison to having a low cost. So we're going to look at the flip now. The flip is, how does these factors, which are demand and supply, affect pricing of items? Now, the table here that I have speaks to demand and supply. So one, we have, let's say supply remains constant, and we increase the amount of demand. This increase in demand will cause an increase in pricing. And let's say the demand reduces. If the demand reduces, we're going to look at the prices being increased. Flip, prices being decreased, Then let's look at the demand. If demand remains constant, our supply will increase. And if our supply increases, the price for items would normally decrease. And if we have supply being reduced, we look at prices going up. So these items are all factored right around looking at how these prices are impacted by supply and by demand. Before I break down the table, let's look at two key terms. We have complementary and substitute goods. First, complementary goods. Complementary goods are consumed together. These items are normally utilized together. So for example, we have here common, rice and peas. Those are what we call complementary items. And we have, typically when you go to the shop to buy scallion, they give you a pinch at a time, right? Because those two items are actually complementary. So can you think of another complementary item that's sold together? I'm sure somebody said bun and cheese, right? And true, it's actually complementary items as well. Next one is substitute goods. Substitute goods, these are items that are consumed in place of the other. So if one is not available, the other would have been your, plan B. So for example, you go to the market to buy lettuce, right? Lettuce not available or it's expensive, what would you do? Purchase cabbage instead. So we'll say that lettuce and cabbage are substitute good. You can use one in place of the other. Pork and chicken. This Christmas, I'm sure you're going to have a wide variety of pork options and bacon and ham and all of that, right? But if the price for this pork goes up, I'm sure you're going to have a wide variety of chicken, because chicken will be maybe more reasonable. So you can have baked chicken, stewed chicken, curry chicken, right? So these items are items that are used in place of another. So we have complementary good and substitute good. So let's break down our chart, our table. Let's look at first how demand impacts pricing. So first, demand increases. No change in our supply, price will increase. So demand increase based on the amount of items that we have available. So let's say we're looking at tomato so you can better understand. If the demand for tomato increases, which means more persons are requiring tomato, because one, maybe the season for tomatoes, right? Or it's a booming business that people want to actually produce a tomato paste. So the increase in demand goes skyrocket. There's a rapid increase for tomato. So this would say, you know what? If the increase in demand is there for tomato, the price eventually will be higher. The selling price would rise because more persons want the items. Hence, you would have an increase in pricing for these items in the market space. And let's look at the flip. Let's look at demand. If the demand for tomato falls, which means nobody is really buying tomatoes anymore, what will happen is that the price would have to go down. Because if the farmer or the seller does not reduce his price, what will happen is he will have an oversupply of this item in the market space. And having an oversupply of items would lead to what? Wow. Can I say more? It will lead to a wide variety of different challenges. So what the farmer would have to do is reduce the price of these items. So a reduction in demand would cause a reduction in the pricing of these items. Let's look at a scenario case today. 1. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the government has restricted the importation of Irish potato to reduce the risks of contracting the virus from high-risk countries. The action has caused a shift by consumers to yam in the market space. How will this affect the price for yam? This question was actually structured by one of my class batches, which is Mr. Colin Chen. So let's look at the question further. If we're going to break down this question, it's asking you more than one thing. One, we have an item that is no longer being drawn into our country. So we no longer have access to Irish potato. So consumers now turn to what? A complementary or substitute? Right. They will now turn to a substitute good. So now they would want yam to purchase. Now wanting yam to purchase would impact the price for yam because now we have an increase in the demand for yam. What will happen? 1, the decrease in the supply of Irish potato, which is the obvious because now there's a ban on the importation. 2, increase in the demand for yam. So once you have an increase in an item, over time you'll have an undersupply. So here we'll have maybe a shortage in yam over a period of time. Now the result, how the demand would impact the price for yam is that now we would have an increase in the price for yam because we have an increase in the demand for yam. So once you have an increase in the demand for an item, we will normally have an increase in the price of these items within the market space. Now, let's go further to look at the demand impact on prices. Now, scenario case number 2, you'll try on your own. Let's go. So, the question says, how will the re-importation of potatoes affect the demand for yam? How does a change in demand affect the price for yam? So again, this question, hold a break, we're going to go to a break and then return. But however, let me read before we go to such break. How will the re-importation of potatoes affect the demand for yam? How does a change in demand affect the price for yam? So remember, look at the table above and it will actually guide you in how best to answer the question. So we are going to pause right here and take a quick break. Stay with us, we'll return.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.
Welcome back, students. So I left you with a question which stated, how will the reimportation of potatoes affect the demand for yam? And how does a change in demand affect the price for yam? Let's look if you guys got the questions correct. The answer correct. So let's see what would happen. Yes, we'll have a demand in a decreasing demand for yam. Also increasing supply for Irish potato, because at this point now the reimportation of potato is as obvious. Now what will happen to the price for yam? Right. The price for yam would now decrease because there is competition on the market space. So now based on that fact now, customers are not only targeting just yam, they have options. This will lead to a reduction in the pricing for the item. So now let's look how supply impacts price. Now, the diagram here speaks to supply and its impact on pricing in the market space. So let's say demand remains constant. Supply would increase, or supply increases. And if supply increases, the price for items would actually be reduced. So if you have an increase in supply of tomato in the market space, the price will fall. And you have an undersupply, the price would increase. So if you have an oversupply of items in the marketplace, what will happen is that the farmers or the sellers want to get them off their hand. So they would sell them for, as in Jamaican term, little and nothing, right? So I can remember back then, $20 per pound for tomatoes, $10 per pound. I'm serious. That's how low sometimes prices go once you have an oversupply of items in the market space, or would say a surplus of items in the market space. Then we look at having supplies being reduced. If supply decreases, the price would naturally go up in the snap of a finger, because once you have a shortage of an item, I only have 5 tomatoes in my hand. Here what? Hot potty. You remember that term, right? What will happen is that who can afford it? So it was for, let's say, $400 today. When you come back next week when I have less tomatoes, it'll be $500. Because if you don't know, currently by maybe the end of this program, sweet peppers will be $1,000 per pound in the market today. That's how it goes. So once you have an undersupply of an item, the prices skyrocket. So let's look at a scenario case. Manchester rather has recorded an increase in the reports on the negative impact of heavy rains on the production of melon in the parish. How will this supply and price for melon be affected? So there's a negative impact on the heavy rains we had the other day on melons in the parish. So how will this impact the supply of melon and the price for melon? Let's see if you're thinking. What will happen? Give you about a minute. Let's take a second. Let's see if you guys are correct or with me. The price of melon will what? The price of melon will increase because we now have a shortage. Great. Next, there will be a decrease in supply for melon. And what will happen to the price for melon? The price for melon, as it said before, would increase. Great. So you're with me. Let's flip it around. What would happen on the flip side if we now had an increase in the amount of melon supplied? What would happen? The price would what? The price would decrease because now we have an oversupply of melon in the market space. And also the amount of melon, would increase, as obvious. So it does impact the pricing. Supply and demand does affect the price for items. So now we're going to look further on how these items are normally represented. These actions are represented on tables. So we now look to what we call the demand schedule. The demand schedule is a table that represents the prices and quantity demanded at various prices. The demand curve and the demand schedule that we're going to look at, these are actually tools that we use to summarize the relationships between the quantity demanded and the price for a good. So as we revert to looking at the law of demand, it states that what? The higher the price, the reduction in the amount of items that is demanded. And the table speaks as just. So when the price is $10, the amount demanded would be basically maybe nothing because it's expensive. And if the price reduces to $8, I mean, £2 will be demanded. So therefore, it looks on as the prices decrease, the amount of items demanded would increase. So the higher the price, less demanded. The lower the price, the more items that is demanded in the market space. So let's look at the example. Putting our schedule on our curve. So this is what we call a demand curve. The demand curve slopes from left to right. This is a representation of tomatoes in the market space. So as we realize that we would match items together, so as our prices are reflected on the y-axis and our quantity would be represented on our x-axis. So here we have pairing together the point where we have when the cost for tomato is $10, we have a reduction in the amount, or none is actually purchased. The price is reduced to $8. We have 2 kilograms of tomato that will be purchased, and it goes on. So this reflection is showing you how the market space is reacting to prices over time. Now, what affects the curve is what we call factors, right? Factors impact demand curve. Factors, we're going to look at a few of them. We have price of the actual goods or service. We have income, change in price of the related items, advertisements, taste and preference and expectation. So let's look at one of them. Change in the price of related items. So let's say we have complementary goods, and we're looking at how rice complements peas. So if we have an increase in the demand for one item, it would impact the other item, right? Let's look at substitute items. Let's say we're looking at coffee and we're looking at tea. If we have an increase in the price for coffee, it would actually increase the demand for tea, because the price for coffee is so high, some persons will revert to the substitute, which is the tea. So hence you'll have an increase in the demand for tea. So that is how we look at how the change in these prices impact related goods. Let's look at income. How does your income impact your demand for items? If you have an increase in salary, this would impact your basically what you would buy in the market space. So let's say you got $1,000 extra for your salary, right? You would, instead of buying 5 pounds of chicken, you'd now maybe buy 10 pounds of chicken. But the flip side, if you have a reduction in your income, you maybe buy less of the items, or you maybe buy a substitute that is cheaper at that price point. So we look at how income impacts the basic. Now we look at the price of goods and services. As we said before, once the price for items increase, the demand for items, these items would actually be reduced. So let's look at another. Let's look at how we have something that is called a shift in demand. Now, a shift in demand, students, we look at a change in the determinants of demand except price. This will shift the demand curve. The curve shifts to the right if the determinants cause demand to increase, and shift to the left if it causes the demand to decrease. So these determinants are what we call the factors that we looked at prior to this. So if one factor like income would basically cause an increase in demand, the curve itself would actually shift to the right. So as you'll see the diagram here, once these determinants impact the curve, we will have a change in position. So the curve will now shift to the right if these determinants cause an increase, and then shift to the left if these factors causes a decrease. So an increase would move to the right and a decrease would move to the left. The curve will shift to the left. Let's look at supply. Now, we have the supply schedule. Now, here we have schedule. Now, the schedules normally are a reflection of what the laws state prior. And as we said earlier, the law of supply states that once you have an increase in price, the supply will increase. So, a supply schedule is a table that shows the quantity supplied at different prices in the market space. A supply curve and schedule, both these are tools, as I said before, that actually shows the relationship between the amount of goods supplied and the price for these items. Now, so here we have a reflection, our schedule on board. Now, what we have here is that when the price is zero, nobody will want to supply if there's no value on these items. If the price increases to $2, the farmers would say, you know what, I'm going to supply a certain portion. So here we have 2 kilograms being supplied. Then we look at the price increase. So each time the price increases, so does the supply. So once the price for an item goes up, so will the supplier. They will say, you know what, the economic standpoint, I need to make more money because if this is expensive, I'm going to supply more because it's in a high demand in the market space. Let's break it down. Let's look at the curve and the schedule. So this is an example of a supply curve. Before we realized that the demand curve sloped from left to right. Here we have our supply curve. The supply curve slopes from right to left. Now, the curve here is a reflection of the demand schedule as seen here. So as the prices increase, so will the quantity. And it's reflected on the table here on our Y and X axis, where at the price point of $10, 10 kilograms of tomato will be supplied. And it continues down until we have an increase, a decrease in the amount of items that will be supplied at various price points. So, as we looked at before, we identified factors that impacted demand. Now, what factors would actually impact the supply of items in our market space? Now, here are a few items, a few factors. We look at price of goods and service, cost of production, technology, government policy, size of the market, expectations, and time. Let's highlight a few. So, let's look at size of the market. So, if there's an increase in supply, you have a wide variety of persons supplying an item, that means there's a large supply over time that will be present within the market space. So the size of the market would actually impact the amount of supply at any given time. We look at what we say is expectations. Let's look at future expectation. If you expect in the future that you're going to have an increase in the supply for, I'm going back to my tomatoes, if you're going to have an increase in the amount of tomatoes in the market space, that means that increase would actually impact you now. So you say, you know what, I'm not going to buy that much. I'm not going to produce that much now because in the future you're going to have that amount anyway. So these impact the amount of items supplied in the market space. Let's look at government policies. A few policies that we have are tax and subsidies. So the imposing of taxes on items, if you increase the amount of tax for an item, that would actually impact the supply. So we look at having these policies in place, and the tax itself would actually say, fine, if there's an increase in tax, you're going to have a reduction in the amount of items supplied. If the taxes are reduced, you would actually have an increase in the amount of items supplied. And say, be it subsidies. If items are subsidized by the government themselves, what will happen? It will influence and actually encourage farmers to actually produce more. And this would cause an increase in the supply for items as well. Now let's look at the price for goods that we spoke about earlier. This speaks on if you have an increase in price, you're going to have an increase in supply. We good, guys? So I'm guessing you're understanding a few of these concepts themselves. So let's look at a shift in the supply curve. So the curve shifts to the right if the determinant causes supply to increase, and it shifts to the left if it causes it to decrease. So once you have more goods being supplied at every single price point, this would cause a shift in the actual curve. So if we have an increase in the amount of items supplied, the determinant causes a change in the position of the curve. We will have the curve moving to the right. And if we have the determinants causing the price points to change right across the area, we're going to have a shift to the left of the actual curve. So the supply curve will shift to the right if there's an increase in supply, and will move to the left if there's a decrease in supply. Now, these two price points would actually, at some point, we're going to have our supply and our demand coming together. What we call this is our equilibrium, right? Now, our equilibrium point or price. The equilibrium point is where the supply and demand are equal, and they arrive at an equilibrium price, which is normally evident. So you'll have both supply and demand curve on the same plotted together, and where both curves meet, we would have what we call an equilibrium. The equilibrium price is the market price where the quantity of goods demanded is equal to the quantity of goods that is supplied. So we're looking at having the obvious. So the blue dot here represents where we have the point where both the demand and the supply meets. And the red dot there speaks on the price that we would get when both our demand and our supply curve meet. So at this point will be the best price to sell items where we have our demand and our supply, they are both equal, right? So let's break it down a little bit further. Now, supply and demand. So here we have both the price, we're looking at the price for tomato, right? Now we're looking at where both our demand and our supply meets. So what happened here is that our equilibrium price point, can anybody look and tell me what would be the best price to sell tomato for in the market space based on our equilibrium point, where both curve meet? Right. So to make the most suitable point would have been where we have the price at $6 and 6 kilograms of tomatoes would have been sold. So the best price at this point would have been for $6 per pound, per kilogram. So here's where how the market space themselves try to generate price points throughout the actual time by utilizing our equilibrium. So over time, students, you're going to find that within our market space, we have a wide variety of different influences that causes the prices for items to increase or to decrease. So we have where we're going to look at the flip side of what we looked at initially. So initially, we identified the image here, right? And we found out that there was an increase in the price for tomatoes over the period of time. So it increased by $370. Right? So can you think to yourself, what could be some of the reasons why the tomato price increased over the couple of months? I'm giving you about a second or so to tell me. Let's see if you're correct. 1, there may be a shortage of tomato in the market space. That's very good. That's true. That could be a reason. 2, increase in the demand for tomatoes. So you're on the right track, right? So this would have been 2 important items that we could consider why the price for tomato has increased. Now, let's do a recap of what we did today. So 1, we looked at the demand and we looked at supply. Demand is the principle referring to a consumer's desire to purchase goods and the willingness to pay a price for a specific good at a given time. 2, we looked at supply. Supply refers to the concept that describes the total amount of a specific good or service that is available to consumers at a specific time. 3, we looked at some of the factors that impacted demand, which are a few. We have change in income, change in taste or preference, change in price of related items. We also looked at the factors affecting supply. We looked at price, production, cost, and technology. We also looked at complementary goods and substitute goods. Complementary goods are consumed together. Substitute goods are consumed in place of the other. An example, substitute good we look at, lettuce and cabbage. Good. Demand. So along with demand, demand along with supply determines the actual price of goods and the volume of goods that change. The price of a good is determined by the interaction of supply and demand. So students, I do hope today you guys actually got the concepts together or erased few of the doubts in your mind on what are some of the reasons why prices increase over time for goods and services. So today's quote is, "What you see depends on how you view the world." To most people, this is just dirt. But to a farmer, it is potential. Again, to most people, this is just dirt. But to a farmer, a young farmer like you, see potential. Okay? So listen, we're out for today and we're gonna wrap up. So this is CSEC Agricultural Science. I hope and wish you guys a safe day. Up next, we have CSEC French. See you soon.
No, man. Oh, merci beaucoup. Yes, good job.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I think maybe what I said, come here, let me pick your bird. Vinny? Oh. That sounds like my grandmother. Auntie, I'm here.
Allez, voilà. Combien de temps passe? I need to put this on.
Alright, you guys worked out how you introducing.
Yeah, we plan to just use what you have and then after you sneak off and come back on.
Okay.
This part. What would be the best time for him to come off?
It depends on what is it that you're doing. It's on?
Well, there's a blue line.
Try it. It has battery?
Maybe it doesn't because it's not. There's a blue line.
Question. So you are going to start an introducing who's going to walk on after you've already
So we decided we're gonna just stick with the script that you have.
Alright, there you go.
the script?
Alright, I just have to put back the words.
This one.
No, I mean in terms of both of you are going to be on set?
Yeah,
You start?
and
That's
then
what
he
I'm-
sneaks
what I
off.
wanted to- Oh, so you start and then he goes.
Yeah,
And he
I'll
doesn't
go
come
through
back?
yeah, he'll come back. I'll go through the objectives and then he's gonna come on because we're doing a little skit like in the start. Like
Okay.
you understand?
Want to see what it looks like?
Let's
Okay.
run through.
All right. Good day, students. Welcome to class
Where
time.
will you be when she says that?
I'll be over here.
Will you be right there?
Yeah.
Harold, is he okay that you need him to know? You need him to go around somewhere? Yeah, I know. That's why I said if he's alright for you. Is he alright for you? Okay. Huh? Are you going to be using?
Those? No,
Yeah.
we're not using the whiteboard.
You're going to be using that one?
Yeah, we're just using this.
Okay. Okay. All right. So when you're reading, read from that camera.
Okay. Good day, students. Welcome to TVJ. Oh, it's not moving up. Welcome to class time. Then you're going to say bienvenue.
Bonjour les élèves. Bienvenue à Class Time.
I am Kristen Blake,
Et je m'appelle Antoine Williams.
your CSEC French teachers for this session. Today, we're going on an unforgettable summer experience. Okay. So I'll keep looking at this camera all the time. Okay. At the end of today's lesson, you will be able to describe an experience during a summer vacation, correctly recount events using the passé composé and the imperfect tense, and write an informal letter. Écoutez bien. Now, yes?
The producer wanted you to look on.
Oh, sure. Makes it easier for me.
It's here. Interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel
so
on
after the
onespotmedia.com.
he's gonna
With a
come on
combination
with
of
his
live
suitcase.
Zoom classes and
Remember, you're
recorded
reading the
class
questions
time,
first, so we'll
schools
have
not
a
out
check.
lessons,
Oh, yeah.
and numerous educational content. We've created
we'll
a
have a short-
comprehensive
Alright, I
24-hour
want to do a
channel
full run
dedicated
through with him on
exclusively
Okay.
to educating our nation's youth.
Alright,
Early
so after I
childhood through
finish
to
reading
primary,
the question-
secondary and tertiary,
Alright.
it's one
starting
stop
over?
on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of
Alright.
Education, Youth and Information in association with Television Jamaica Limited.
All right. So, good day, students. Welcome to class time.
Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue les élèves. Welcome to Class Time.
I am Kristen Blake,
Et je m'appelle Antoine Williams.
and today we are your CSEC French teachers for this session. Today, we are going on an unforgettable summer experience. At the end of today's lesson, you will be able, oh, Jesus, should I go through this? Now,
Hi there,
you're
I'm
going
Simon
to hear
Preston from TVJ.
a
Thank you
little
very much for
conversation,
watching our
and
YouTube
I
channel.
want you to
see our
listen
latest
well,
videos and also to see
because
live
we're going
events,
to
click
answer
here.
all
To see
these
our full
questions.
videos on
All
onespotmedia.com,
right? And then I
click
read
here.
them.
Thank you very much for watching.
At that point, when you're engaging the students, this is your camera, so this is where you look.
Okay.
Try to avoid looking on the monitor, look straight into this camera right here. So this is when you're now interacting with the board. Whenever you try to engage the students,
Yeah,
this
look,
is
I'll
where you
just
are.
switch my vision. Okay.
Yeah.
So, today, you're going to be listening to a Good day, students. Welcome to class time.
Bonjour les élèves. Bienvenue à Class Time.
I am Kristen Blake,
Et je m'appelle Antoine Williams.
and we are your French teachers for this session. Today, we are going on an unforgettable summer experience. At the end of today's lesson, you will be able to describe a summer vacation you had. Also, you'll be able to recount past events using the passé composé and the imperfect tense. Also, you'll be able to write an informal letter in French. Now, you're going to be listening to a conversation, right, between myself and Antoine. Listen carefully so that you'll be able to answer these questions. First question, how is Kristen doing? Next, where is Antoine coming from? Number 3, to which country did he travel? Number 4, what was the reason for his trip? And number 5, state 2 questions that Kristen asked about his trip. Now, get your pens and your paper and let's go.
Salut Christian, ça va?
Oui, ça va, mais tu es allé où? Tu viens d'où?
Oui, de l'aéroport. En fait, je suis arrivé il y a une demi-heure et je suis venu directement ici afin de ne pas rater cette leçon.
Oh, tu es allé où alors?
Ah, j'ai voyagé en Guadeloupe pour le mariage de mon frère aîné.
Tu blagues?
Non?
J'ai tant de questions. Mais c'était comment l'expérience? Est-ce qu'ils ont pleuré?
Oui.
Ah, c'était comment, il faisait comment pendant la cérémonie?
Ah, mais tu as beaucoup de questions.
Oui, j'ai tant de questions.
On va en parler après. Mais
D'accord.
maintenant, il faut enseigner.
D'accord. All right, so I'm going to see what you all heard today. So, let's do it again.
Sure. Écoutez bien. Salut Christian, ça va?
Oui, ça va. Quoi de neuf, Antoine? Oui, je vais bien. D'où viens-tu? De l'aéroport?
Oui. En fait, je suis arrivé il y a une demi-heure et je suis venu directement ici afin de ne pas rater cette leçon.
Ah, et tu es allé où alors?
J'ai voyagé en Guadeloupe pour le mariage de mon frère aîné.
Wow, tu blagues. J'ai tant de questions. Tu étais là pendant combien de temps? C'est comment le décor? Ils ont choisi quelle couleur? Ah, quel temps faisait-il lors de la cérémonie? Est-ce qu'on a pleuré? Tes parents étaient-ils là aussi?
So,
All
that
right.
was our little dialogue.
So let's see if you can answer the questions. How is Kristen doing? Where is Antoine coming from? I know you got it right. To which country did he travel?
For what reason was the trip?
And what are 2 questions that Kristen asked? Okay, let's look at it together.
Be sure to put those ticks where you got them right, and if you made any mistakes, you can correct them as you go. The aim is to learn.
Okay, so here we are. Number 1.
So for number 1, the answer was she's doing well. Christian had said, je vais bien.
Right, and for number 2, where is Antoine coming from? He's coming from the airport, and as you can see, he has a suitcase there. Oui, une valise.
Number 3, to which country did he travel? I hope you'd have heard Guadeloupe.
Yes, en Guadeloupe. What was the reason for his trip?
it was the wedding of my older brother.
Definitely. And of course, I'm sure you have more than 2 questions that I asked, but here are all of them. So number 1, for how long were you there? What was the decor like? What colors did they choose? What was the weather like on the day of the ceremony? And did anyone cry? And were your parents there as well? Quite a lot of questions, right, Antoine?
Quite a lot of questions.
Yes, we tend to get excited when it comes on to weddings. Alrighty. Okay, so students, tell me, what tenses did you identify in the conversation?
Let's give them a clue. Well, you should have identified 2 primary tenses. Those are what we're looking for. There may have been more, but we're looking for 2. So let's see what they are, Chrisanne.
Le passé composé.
Et l'autre?
C'est l'imparfait.
Ouais. Le passé
Super.
composé.
Alrighty. So, voici quelques exemples avec le passé composé dans la conversation.
Je suis arrivé il y a une demi-heure.
J'ai voyagé en Guadeloupe pour le mariage de mon frère aîné.
Et tu es allé où alors?
I'm sure you were able to identify all those sentences in the passé composé. All right? So just a quick reminder. There are 2 auxiliary verbs used to form the passé composé, avoir and être. Also, be sure to revise which verbs take each auxiliary verbs. So I know that can be a little tricky, but just study them. And also to help you, you can up over to French Action on YouTube and check out the videos on the passé composé. There is one in particular called 7 Ways to Remember to Be Verbs in the Passé Composé. All right, students, so make sure to check it out. All right, so now we're going to be looking at some examples from the imperfect tense.
Right. And as you can tell, both tenses are past tenses. So, quel temps faisait-il lors de la cérémonie?
And can you tell us what is that verb in the imperfect tense? You get it right. Bravo. Oui, faisait.
Tes parents étaient-ils présents aussi?
And of course, the verb is était.
Tu étais là pendant combien de temps?
All right. One more.
C'était comment le décor?
Oui, oui. Excellent. And I'm sure you understand all those questions. So now we're going to explore a little, okay? Explorons ensemble. And we're doing this by way of a letter, all right? So comme vous voyez, Kingston, 10 décembre 2020. All right. So Antoine,
Oui.
go right ahead. Let's
On va
hear-
lire.
Yes.
Lisons. Chère Élodie, je t'écris pour te dire d'une expérience horrifiante que j'ai vécue il y a 2 ans. C'était en été. Je suis allé faire une promenade en radeau sur la Martha Brae avec ma famille. Il faisait tellement beau et la rivière était calme. Au début, j'avais peur de monter sur le radeau. Néanmoins, avec l'encouragement de mes parents, je suis finalement monté. Mes parents et mes frères m'ont suivi et ils sont montés sur le radeau sans souci.
Wow, c'est très intéressant.
Très intéressant. On continue.
Oui.
Le radeau s'est déroulé. Tout allait bien, puis j'ai entendu un cri étrange qui provenait du fond de l'eau. J'étais terrifié. C'est quoi ça, maman? J'ai demandé, mais ma mère m'a dit que je devais rester calme et m'asseoir. C'était dur. J'ai essayé de rester calme, mais après quelques minutes, j'ai vu quelque chose de noir qui traversait la rivière. Il était très gros. C'est un crocodile. J'ai crié, au secours, au secours! Je me suis levé pour bien voir l'animal, mais j'ai perdu mon équilibre et je suis tombé splash dans l'eau.
Wow.
Ni mes parents, ni mes frères savaient nager. Alors le capitaine du radeau est venu me sauver. Quel jour horrible! Enfin, on a découvert que la chose que j'ai vue dans l'eau, c'était juste une pièce de bois. C'était bien sûr un été inoubliable pour moi.
Wow. Wow. C'est très intéressant. Est-ce que vous avez compris, tout le monde? Did you understand? All right, so we're going to go through some of the examples that we had in this passage with the passé composé and the imperfect tense. All right? Quand utilisons-nous le passé composé et l'imparfait? Okay, I can see you thinking about it. Oui, réfléchissez. Très bien. All right. So, okay. So the imperfect tense is used to say what was taking place when another interrupted. But before, we're going to actually go through the passage so that you can understand exactly what was taking place.
All right.
Okay?
We want you also to take note of the format of the letter, because when you go to do your exams for CXC, there's a particular way in which they want you to set the letter up. And there's no sense losing easy marks when all you need to do is lay out the letter properly on the paper.
Definitely.
So for example, let's look at the address. For the address, all you need to put is the city or town from which you're writing, followed by the date. And we write the date in French every day, so this is definitely not going to be a problem for you. So there we have it, Kingston, le 10 décembre 2020. Then we have our salutation. So for informal letters, which are the requirement for CXC, you will be using cher, whether in the masculine or in the feminine form.
All right, so let's ask them, what would it be if we were writing to, say, Sébastien?
Sébastien. So, given that you asked me about Sébastien, I can tell that right now we're writing to a female. That would be Elodie. And students, it's always good to know some French names. It's really good when if you say you're writing to a French pen pal, you know, they can have English names, but if you have a French name, that will definitely show that you're thinking culturally as well.
Right.
So if it were Sébastien, we know that where we have cher avec le E,
Accent, oui.
where we would remove the accent grave from the first E, and we would also remove the last E. So we'd be left with C-H-E-R, C-H-E-R.
Voilà.
There you go. So then we can see that we have the letter. So it's a letter about the summer vacations, as we would have explained before. So you want to start off, in a little, to build the rapport between yourself and the person to whom you are addressing the letter. So Michael and Elodie have a relationship. They have a little thing going. And he said, I'm writing to you to tell you about a horrifying, one of those horrible experiences that I would have experienced or that I ever had 2 years ago. It's important that you give some structure to it, because when the examiners are going to check, they want to know, do they know the correct verbs to use? Do they understand the tense that they're supposed to be manipulating? And how is it that they move from one stage to the next? So obviously, you can't just jump from cher to start saying, oh, au revoir. That will definitely not work. You can't move from there to saying goodbye. So you lay out the format, and as we're going to see when we go further down to describe the different tenses, particularly the imperfect tense and the passé composé, you will note that the imperfect tense is what we're using to kind of set the background. So we're setting the background so a person understands what's going on, and then we use the passé composé to move the story along.
Right. All right. So Antoine just explained to you that, yes, I'm writing to tell you about an experience, a horrifying experience that I had 2 years ago. Now, Elia means ago, right? So that's an expression that you might need to jot down so you can use it in your letters or whatever you're writing. So, c'était en été. So you need to tell them what was the setting like, you know? When was it? It was during the summer. So, je suis allé faire une promenade en radeau. Now, what is that saying, Antoine?
So, I would have gone for a little spin on the raft. So I'd have gone rafting. And as you can see, the picture kind of gives you an idea. We want for those visual learners to be able to picture what it is that we are going on. As we note that we've spoken about the Martha Bray. So definitely you can tell that Michael would be Jamaican, or he was visiting Jamaica 2 years ago when he went on this trip. When you write your letters, CXC would normally ask you perhaps to write about a French Caribbean territory or a French territory in general that you would have visited. So my encouragement to you is this: make sure you do some research on the French Caribbean territories.
Right,
Look up
definitely.
at Guadeloupe, Martinique, even Haiti. Make sure you know something. So when you're writing your letter, you're not just saying, you know, I went to the park. You can go to the park in Jamaica. So use some of those very interesting cultural facts. So your cultural awareness will definitely earn you points when it comes to CXC. So make sure you do that research so that you can get as many marks as possible.
Right. Okay, so it was on the Martha Bray. All right, great. So what exactly happened here?
Well, everything seemed to have started off well. The river was calm.
Oui, c'était calme. La
Right.
rivière était calme.
And then we see that, you know, there was a bit of fear and apprehension there. We don't know how old Michael was, but let's say he was 5. So Michael decided that he was a bit afraid to go on the raft.
Right.
But, you know, parents and his brothers, his siblings, would have encouraged him and he would have hopped onto the raft. Then things kind of got a bit shaky.
Right, and note the tenses that are used here when things change, okay? So something was happening and then another event intercepted it. All right.
Right. So Michael's on the raft, his parents are on the raft, siblings are on the raft, and they move off. Then Michael decides that he wants to have some wild experience. So he hears something, he hears a noise coming from the bottom of the water, and he's terrified. He shouts out,
Help!
He'd say in general, "I want that, mommy." But you know, he said it in English. Sure. What's that, mommy? So he asked his mother what it was, but she said, "Boy, keep yourself calm. Sit down. Nothing's the matter." So he was calm for a while, and afterwards, you know, he saw something moving, and then he decided to shout, "Help! Help! It's a crocodile!"
Oui.
But at the end of the day, what happened is that it wasn't really a crocodile. But Michael,
Let's
in all
ask
that,
them. I wonder if they figured it out. What
Okay.
was it that was moving in the water? I can hear you. Yes, Sylvie. Oui, oui, oui. Yes, it was a piece of
wood with a piece of
right,
log.
it was just a piece of log. So you can just imagine how horrifying that was. He thought
Right.
it was a crocodile.
But it's
Alright.
interesting that he thought it was a crocodile, but he managed to fall into the water. Not the safest thing, students. Not the safest thing to do.
Right. Because he was, you know, he wanted to see what it was, and then he fell. And notice the word tombe, which is used, used in the passé composé, it is used with which verb? Être, the helping verb être. All right? So we're going to now go and explore what are some of the uses of the imperfect and some of the uses of the passé composé. All righty. So I know that you're already thinking and you have your answers. All right. So, Antoine, number 1.
Right. So we have the table set up for comparison. So let's see how we do. So number 1, the imperfect tense is used to say what was taking place when another action interrupted it. So this action being described by the imperfect tense is an incomplete action. We don't know when it ended or even if it ended. Here's an example. Tout allait bien, puis j'ai entendu un bruit étrange. So the verb in the imperfect tense would be aller.
Ali.
And we remember how to form the imperfect tense, correct?
Yes. Actually, I have a little song. So it goes, A-I-S, A-I-S, A-I-T, I-O-N-S, I-U-Z, A-I-U-N-T, A-I-S, A-I-S, A-I-T, I-O-N-S, I-U-Z, A-I-U-N-T. And that's to remember the endings for the imperfect tense.
And with that rendition, you can see why I didn't come by myself today. So, we have aller because that was explaining what was the state. Everything was going well. We don't know if it stopped or if it ended, but it was going well.
All right.
So for the passé composé, or let's just go through all of them for the imperfect tense. So for the imperfect tense, it says, is used to describe a repeated or habitual action. Repeated habitual actions again in the past. So it's explaining what happened an indefinite number of times. It's good to underline the word indefinite, so we don't know how many. So here's another example. Quelque chose noir qui traversait la rivière. So it was
Yes, it was going across the river.
across
okay?
the river.
All right, so we're going to look at the other one.
Number 3 says, it's used to describe an ongoing state of being or feeling in the past. Au début, j'avais peur de monter sur le radeau. So I was feeling fearful. That was my state of being. Number 4 is used to set the background for an account. For example, to tell what the weather was like. So from the letter we know that il faisait beau,
Oui.
it was good weather. So normally the weather goes in the imperfect tense.
Right.
Right, so that's for the imperfect. Let's look now to the passé composé.
All right. So with the passé composé, this describes a completed action in the past. It happened, and that's it. So we're done. The action is done. It's completed. J'ai crié, for example. J'ai crié. I shouted, and that's it. It was a one-off event, one time. All right? The next one says, describes an action that occurred at a definite number of times in the past. So here we have, j'ai vu quelque chose noir qui traversait la rivière. J'ai vu here indicates it only happened once. So in the moment I saw something, it happened and it finished one time. All right? Once. Also, the passé composé is used to describe a change in state of being. So, at a point I was this way, but then my state changed. So, j'ai perdu mon équilibre. I lost my balance. All right? J'ai perdu mon équilibre. And the last one, the passé composé is used to move a narration along. Right? Enfin, on a découvert que. For example, on a découvert. So we discovered. Right? And this is to help to bring the story along. All right? I think you learned quite a lot. So let's practice. Pratiquons. Pratiquons tout le monde. All right.
Alors, regardez chaque photo et décrivez avec une phrase une expérience d'été vraie ou imaginée. So, look at each picture and use one sentence to describe a summer experience. And this experience can either be real, meaning you've lived it, or it can be imagined.
All right. So guess what? I want you to practice using both the imperfect and the passé composé in the same sentence. On y va. Get your books and pens ready. All right. Voici une photo. Voici la photo. Réfléchissez, s'il vous plaît. Think about it. Write your sentence. All right.
I think for those in Portland, this should be an easy sentence to write.
This should be very easy.
Very easy
C'est
sentence to
très
write.
facile pour eux. Oui. Okay, let's see what we have. We have a suggestion, right, Antoine?
Yes, we do. Let's
All
see
right,
it.
let's go. La rivière était très calme quand Monsieur Biggie a commencé le tour.
Right. So whoever Mr. Big is, big up yourself. So, la rivière était calme. So we see that the first verb is in the imperfect tense. It's describing the setting. This is how it was. And then we see quand Mr. Biggie a commencé le tour. So he started the tour. He's not still starting, but he started the trip on the raft.
So the action has ended. Okay?
Right.
And était, no, il était calme, that's describing how the atmosphere was, right? All right, great. So let's look at this picture. I'm sure for Jamaicans, for you, this is a very, something that you might do or see all the time.
Looks like when Hellshire was really, really populated. But now COVID is there, stay home, people, stay home.
Restez chez vous. Alors, on y va. Let's see our sentence.
Les enfants nageaient dans la plage quand le sauveteur a vu un requin.
Wow. Can you imagine how terrifying that must have been?
Could have been exciting as well, Some people take those things very lightly.
All right.
Not
Do you think the
wise.
students know what is un requin?
Un requin?
Un requin?
Definitely.
All right. So yes, a shark. The lifeguard saw a shark while they were swimming. Wow. All right. Oh, Lord. Okay, so I think I gave you this quickly.
Ah, they got the sentence before.
Alrighty, so, il faisait très beau et ma famille et moi sommes allés à Reach Falls.
Right. So there again, remember in the beginning we had said we use the imperfect tense to kind of set the scene or to tell the weather. Here's an example of where we're using to tell the weather. Il faisait très beau. It was very good weather. And my family and I, we went to Reach Falls.
All right, très bien. OK, regardez cette image. Cette image, oui.
A lot of things come to mind.
Lots of things. Well, let's see what we
Yes.
have. Le chien de mon voisin me poursuivait, donc je suis montée à l'arbre.
So once again, we can see what was happening. There was a chase going on, a heavy chase. You're running from your neighbor's dog, and to avoid the dog, you just run up into the tree, you climb the tree. I want us to note, as we're going on as well, don't miss out on the chance to practice with your pronunciation. So we see the chien, voisin. Those nasal sounds are what you'll really need, especially when oral exams will come up. So practice them.
Yes. Excellent. All right. So, of course, we have homework for you, devoir. All right, but do you think we need to go over anything at all in the lesson? Maybe we should ask them some questions?
Sure. I hope I can hear them from this far. So even as we looked at the passé composé and the imperfect tense, there are a couple things that I believe we may have skipped over, because as you can tell, we're not trying to teach you the tenses. We're trying to compare the use of the imperfect and the passé composé. So
Right.
if you would be so kind as to go back to the letter, there are a few things I want to point out where the passé composé is concerned.
All right, let's go. On y va.
So, as we would have said, we use the passé composé with two auxiliary verbs, avoir and être. We note as well that être is normally the verb which takes agreement.
Right.
So, the subject matters when it comes to être verbs. For avoir, we kind of take it a bit more lightly because, we don't need to agree. Except there are cases in which the past participle must agree even though it is used with avoir.
Avoir.
So let's look at a few of those. Go back to the beginning of the letter for me. So, in the very first line, you will note where it says, Je t'écris pour te dire d'une expérience horrifiante que j'ai vécue. Did you notice that there was an E or an extra E at the end of vécu? It's an avoir verb. But the reason why we have the E is because when you have a direct object coming before the avoir verb in the passé composé, you have to make the agreement. In
Right.
this case, it would have been replaced by que. So it
Right.
says, une expérience horrifiante que. So you're using that introduction from the que to refer back to the
Experience.
experience. And you can tell that experience is feminine. Therefore, you need to add the E.
Right.
These are the finer points that really make you stand out in the eyes of the examiner. So make sure you take good note of them. There was another one closer to the end, so let's look at that one as well. So let me see. I'll give you 30 seconds to see if you can spot this one. Okay, I'll just give you 3. So I'll give you 3 seconds to spot this one. And I'll give you a clue as well. This one is in the second to last line. Can you spot where the agreement was with the direct, let's get it right, with the direct object of the verb in the passé composé? Good. Very good.
Très bien.
You've spotted it. I believe it. So right there, Chrisanne, point it out first.
Oui, c'est j'ai vu. OK? Enfant, on a découvert que la chose que j'ai vue. So notice there's an E, so it's V-U-E. Normally, the past participle of voir is just view. However, in this case, la chose, which is the direct
Object, yes.
object, actually precedes it. So you'll have to agree in gender, right? So it now becomes j'ai vu with an E. Voila.
And Christian made a very important point as well. The agreement is both in number and gender. When we say number, we mean singular or plural. When we say gender, we
We're
mean
talking about-
masculine or feminine. So there wasn't any that had to agree in number as it relates to being plural, but we had for the gender. So please make a note of those, grab your textbooks, ask your teacher how the rule applies and where best to use it.
All right, great. Okay, so we're going to now go on to homework, right? You're going to be writing a letter for yourself, and we actually want to see what you have written, okay? So first of all, let us go through what is required.
And as Christian said, we want to see what you write. So at the end of the program, we will give you the email address, or perhaps if you want to use WhatsApp to send it to us, we'll give you that information so you can have those sent to us and we can give you feedback.
Definitely. Okay, écoutez bien. Write a letter to your French pen pal about an unforgettable summer experience you had. Now, you're going to use one of the 4 pictures as stimulus. So let me just go back so you can remember what those pictures are. All right, let's go. So the first one is a man on a raft. Okay. La deuxième, c'est à la plage. La troisième, c'est à une cascade.
Ouais, Reach
Oui.
Falls.
Et la dernière, c'est dans un arbre.
Ah oui.
Oui.
On sait pas où.
Okay. So think about something exciting that could have happened, you know, in this summer using these pictures as your guide.
And again, we want to encourage you. Although you're very familiar with Jamaica and you have your own experiences here, get practice talking about one of those other places, one of those French territories. It will serve you very, very well when it comes to CXC time. So don't just take this lightly. So when you see the waterfall, imagine that it's found somewhere else. Guadeloupe, Martinique,
Oui.
wherever it is. And remember, there are also African territories which are
That
French
speak
speaking.
French, oui.
So don't limit
Exactement.
yourself just to the Caribbean. Do some research and go ahead.
Okay, so this is the instruction. Write a letter to a French pen pal about an unforgettable summer experience you had. Use one of the 4 pictures as a stimulus. Okay? Also, make sure to include the following details: the date and time of the event, as well as the weather conditions. Also, you should say who were the persons there. Was it with your mom and dad, brothers, sisters, and so on? And also, you must say give a description of an unexpected event that took place. Okay? you should also say how you felt about the experience or how you currently feel about the experience.
Right.
Oui?
And of course, you know that we are expecting you to write in the
Passé composé et l'imparfait.
Very good.
Très bien. All right, so send your homework to levelupyourfrench@gmail.com or by WhatsApp at 508-9943. Maybe we should say that in French. Say,
Ah ouais?
oui,
Oui.
87 65 08 99 43. Oui, oui, oui. All right, or levelupyourfrench@gmail.com. All right, so that's the time we have for CSEC French. Up next is CSEC English Language with us. All right, so thanks for joining and have a great day.
Bonne journée.
Au revoir.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.
For CSEC English.
Hi, you can go ahead and run through with the prompt.
Okay. Welcome back to class time. It's now time for CSEC English Language. I'm your teacher, Vanessa Francis. Today we will be Welcome back to class time. It's now time for CSEC English Language. I'm your teacher, Vanessa Francis, and today we'll be continuing our look at informative discourse. All right, so these are our objectives for today. Of course, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the features of reports, discuss the language of reports, and distinguish between formal report and the memorandum. So, of course, we're going to start with features of the report. So what is a report? You've been doing reports up to now, I would assume, and you have been asked to write different types of reports. So specifically, a report is a type of writing organized around and identifying, examining issues, events, findings that have happened in a physical sense, or events that have occurred within an organization, or findings from research. What should your report have? Well, your report needs to have no opinionated statements. Because of the nature of a report, it's factual. So you don't want to put in your personal opinions anywhere in there. They're not required, they're not asked for. Unless they've been solicited, leave them out. Of course, it needs to have careful and logical arrangement. It needs to be clear in your expression, so there needs to be clarity. And that word again, conciseness. So it means you're going to be direct. You're not going to be long-winded in your explanations. You're not going to put in any frivolous terms. You're going to be concise, and you're going to leave out everything that is unnecessary. Now, when you're writing a report, there are things you need to consider. You need to consider who will be reading your report. So based on who will be reading it, then you know what you need to include in it. What is the purpose of this report? Why were you asked to write it? And based on that purpose, then you know what to include in it as well. Why is the report needed? What was the reason given to you to write this report? And of course, what information should you put in there? So the reports we'll be focusing on today, the formal report, which takes in several types, and the memorandum. So we'll start, of course, with the formal report. Now, the format used for this is generally the formal letter format that we looked at last week. So when you're writing this type of report, the default rule, write a formal or business letter. Why are they used then, or when? Well, you use it to convey factual information in, again, a concise manner. Keep that word in mind, concise. For this particular section of the exam, as well as the summary writing section, that word will keep coming up over and over and over again. So here are a few examples of types of formal reports you might come across. So informative report, as the name suggests, general information. You are just basically asked to write about a certain issue or topic, and hence this report. An analytical report, one where you are possibly going to analyze some facts, some figures, some trends, possibly analyze some phenomenon or phenomena, as the case may be. An eyewitness report, as the name suggests, you were standing somewhere, possibly, hopefully minding your own business, something happened, and you are asked to write about it. An incident report, sometimes confused with an eyewitness report, similar in the sense that you're writing about something that occurred. A progress report, as the name suggests, you're writing about the progress of something. So perhaps you had a project that is ongoing, so you're updating whoever it is about this project. A periodical report. So for instance, many companies have a quarterly report. So every few months they submit a report so people can know what is happening, what's going on, where they're standing financially, and so on. And special report, an umbrella term, you're given a specific reason to write that particular report. Now for the memorandum. What is it? Well, it's a report, yes. It's a little less formal than the formal report, hence the distinction. But for the memoranda, the plural of memorandum, it is specially formatted and it is used within an organization. And that is very important for you to remember. So your memoranda are distributed inside a particular company, firm, business place, whatever the case may be. It's used within. It's an internal business communication tool. And the format, as I said before, it's informal. But just because the format is informal does not mean the memoranda are informal. The memorandum needs to still be businesslike, and it is basically public. So the purpose is usually that within the organization, you use these to make announcements. So if there is a meeting coming up, you can send out a memorandum. If there are certain special dates coming up, you can use it for that as well. You use them to discuss particular procedures. Now that we have this pandemic going on, many businesses had to come up with different protocols so they can inform everyone in the organization using a memorandum. Of course, you can report on company activities. So there are various things that the company might be involved in. You can use that to alert everyone what is going on. And in general, to give employee information. Now here's a look at the format. As you can see, as I said, it's different from the formal letter format. Remember the formal letter format, you had 2 full addresses, the date in between, salutation, that sort of thing. With the memorandum, and now you can see why it's informal. All you have, 2, and you write the person's name as well as their title from your name and your job title. You may also sign it if you wish. The date, of course, is very important, and the subject, what the memorandum is about. So when are they inappropriate? Now, you need to be very careful when you're asked to write any type of report. You need to know if you should use a formal report or if you are required to put it in a memorandum. Now, note carefully, you do not use it when you're sending it to someone who is of a higher rank than yourself, unless, of course, that person said to you, John Brown, write me a memo. If your boss or your superior did not say that, do not take it upon yourself to send them a memo, okay? It's frowned upon. So unless you're told specifically to send a memo to someone higher up than you, use a formal letter. But outside of that, memoranda are sent to people on the same level or to someone who is a junior to you in the firm. And of course, remember, you send it within an organization, so you don't send it to somebody in the business place next door. The next thing, if you have something that is confidential or sensitive, you do not use a memorandum. Confidential or sensitive information is basically private. And remember we said the memoranda are public. So you don't send that type of information via a memo. You send it via a formal letter. So now, steps in writing. So the first thing you need to do for whichever one of the reports you're going to use, you need to identify your audience. You need to know who is your target. Who are you intending to send this to? Who is the intended reader? So you need to establish who that is. And of course, based on who is going to read it, then you will know who and what to write about. Now, of course, in conceptualizing the information, you need to decide what to include. Not everything is important. Remember, you want to keep it concise. So you're going to ensure that you only include information that gives the clearest picture of whatever it is you're trying to convey. So you're not going to add any additional details, any confusing details, nothing like that. You're going to leave that out completely. Of course, you need to structure your report. So your report should also be so structured that it is easy to read, easy to follow. So from start to finish, whoever picks it up and is reading it should be able to understand what it is that's going on, what you're writing about, and all of that. Again, you see that C word keeps coming up? You need to use concise and professional language. So you're going to keep it clear. You're going to keep it professional. You're going to keep it at, I wouldn't say bare minimum, but yes, bare minimum. So you need to get to the point quickly and clearly. So again, you don't want to go round and round and round and round. You want to make a straight path to whatever it is you're trying to convey. And avoid using fluff or wordy sentences. So don't get too verbose. Don't get too loquacious. Save that for another type of writing that encourages that. For this type of writing, conciseness is the key. Of course, if you're going to have a report, you need to proofread it, you need to edit it. You cannot have any kind of report and submit it and you haven't read it over, you haven't made your necessary corrections. So you need to ensure that you read it carefully. Put it aside and then read it later if so be the case. But you need to ensure that it is free from any type of grammatical errors, structural errors, formatting errors, whatever the case may be. And you can, through proofreading now, cut out any unnecessary information. So maybe at some point in the report, you went a little bit off tangent. You started to introduce some topics that really weren't relevant to that report. When you proofread, you can just strike it out so you know that I'm supposed to be talking about sales for this quarter. Why am I talking about purchases from last quarter? How those two things link up. So now, organizing it. So for your report, of course, you're going to be writing in paragraphs. So this is an idea of how you can organize these paragraphs. So you have your opening segment. And if you think carefully, you'd realize your opening segment does the same job as an introductory paragraph. So, of course, for this section, you need to make sure you clearly state the purpose of the report. Again, remember, why have you written this report? What was the stimulus given? Then you talk about the context, and if it's a case where it's a problem, you talk about the problem as well. And you talk about the specific assignment or task, as the case may be. So depending on what the report is about, these are the things you need to address in your opening segment. Now, here are the specifics. So you need to ensure that you give a brief overview of what the report will be about. So in your opening segment, just as how you have a thesis statement in an essay, you need to do something similar in your opening segment of your report. So from the moment I start reading it, your boss starts reading it, your colleague starts reading it, they should get an idea of what to expect. So just in case the report is not meant for that person, then they can always pass it on to whoever it is meant for. Now, of course, the introduction will be based on the type of report you're writing, who you're writing to, the plan you have for the nature of the report. So if you're going to be giving some chronological details, then your introduction should speak to that. If you're just going to be giving some cause and effect details, same. Your introduction needs to address that type of issue so that, again, your reader is prepared for what is coming next. Now, of course, you need to be direct. So the more direct the plan is, then the more direct your introduction should be as well. Of course, you need to include the purpose of the report. Why is this report being written? Why is it necessary? So your audience needs to know what the purpose of the report is, because it's not necessarily a case where the report was requested. Perhaps you had to just write one, and in writing it, you send it off. So again, your reader picks it up. Why did John Brown write this? Oh, because so and so and so and so. So that should be stated. And of course, it should be brief and about one short paragraph. You don't want to be long-winded because the introduction is not the body. The introduction just alerts your reader as to what to expect. So you don't want your introduction to be too long. The next thing now, you need to ensure that you include the context, the circumstance, or the background of whatever issue it is that you're going to be discussing. So they need to know basically the setup. If you're writing a sales report, then of course they want to know what is the period of time that you're writing it for. Is it that you're going to compare this period to another one? That sort of thing. And of course, you may use a paragraph or a few sentences to do this. You don't want to be too long. Remember, this is not the focus of the report, so you don't want to get into too many details this early on. Now, sometimes you can just use a little sentence to explain the context. So here's an example. Through market research and analysis, and you continue. So right there, your reader knows that you're going to talk about market research, you're going to talk about the analysis. Now, again, you only want to include what is relevant, but you also want to ensure that it is clear. Now, for the next section, the task segment. So you're basically going to describe what you're going to do to address the issue, if that is the case, or help solve a problem, if that is the case. Now, if it is a case where an action was requested, then your opening sentence should address this. So you would say something like, in response to your request that I look at such and such. So right there, you are jumping into what your task was. You are addressing the task you have been given. If something slightly different happens and you want to explain your intentions, then you can start with this. To determine the best method of promoting the new fall line, I will such and such and such. So again, your sentences are important. You notice for these two examples, they jump right into the heart of the matter. So you don't need to have any long drawn out preamble. You don't need any long-winded introduction. Get to the point quickly. Now again, you must only include necessary information. So the information that is required by whoever is reading it, whoever is supposed to address this issue. Limit it to that. You don't want to have too many details that are unnecessary. You want to ensure that you stay on point at all times. Now, avoid rambling. Rambling is good for long, leisurely country walks on a Sunday afternoon when you have nothing to do but enjoy nature. Rambling is not good when you are writing a report that should address a certain issue that is addressed to someone who has other issues to address. They need to get the information and they need to get it on spot. So do not ramble in your description of anything. So make sure that you use clear terms. Make sure that you stay on point. Of course, make sure that your purpose statement divides your subject into the most important topics. Purpose statement, topic statement, basically the same idea. So that statement that tells what this report is about, if there is more than one issue that you will address, make that statement notice the person who is going to read it. So that person should know that, okay, John Brown is going to talk about these 3 things. So make sure your statement covers that. Now for the summary segment. As the name suggests, you're going to sum up what is going on. So you're now going to use this for short reports, and you're going to basically key into what the main ideas were. So you don't need to have a very long summary segment, especially if your report is not supposed to be long, but it helps. Now, this segment will provide a brief statement of the recommendations you're making. So if you are asked to address an issue and then to give some suggestions as to how to alleviate an issue or how to mitigate something, then this is where you would put that in. You can also make references to methods and sources that you used. So for this segment, you're basically trying to give answers to whatever questions might have been asked earlier on. Now for the discussion segment, which is the meat of the matter. So even though it says discussion, again, remember, you need to be direct, you need to be concise. So yes, you're going to discuss, but you're not going to discuss in an extended way. You're going to discuss by giving the information and whatever supporting details that are necessary. You're not going to sit down and write 10 pages of discussion. Keep that in mind. So it's the longest portion, yes, but this is where you support whatever ideas you have come up with. So you start with the key findings or recommendations. So if you were supposed to research a problem, then right there you say what you found, maybe the cause of the problem, perhaps the root of the problem, perhaps what is making the problem worse. And then, of course, the recommendations to alleviate this problem, to eliminate this problem possibly. So you're going to start with the most general information first, and then you focus, narrow it down. So you give your supporting details, and you can use the same idea when you're giving the details as well. Start with the strongest point and work down to your weakest point. And this actually works for any type of essay you're writing. Come out strong, because just in case you don't get to finish, you want to know that your strongest points have been made. Continuing with the discussion segment. So you need to make sure you include your supporting details. Any facts, any figures, any research that was done. Have to do that because you want to make sure you substantiate any claims that you're making. So if you say that sales fell because of the weather, then you naturally have to go show that on the days when this particular weather was in play, the sales were this number, as opposed to another day when the sales were up and the weather was different. So you have to make sure your supporting details are there. Include your strong points, and of course include your evidence that you need. And if this section is weak, then it stands to reason the entire report is going to be weak as well. Now for the close. So you have opened it with your introduction, you have addressed the task, you have given some discussion, so now time to wrap it up. So you need to make sure that after whoever is reading it has more or less taken in everything you have to say, you end on a courteous note. Remember, courtesy is very important. So even if it's a case where you are the reason for a certain problem, you still want to make sure that it is courteous. So you want a courteous ending, and of course you want to say what positive action you're going to take coming up. If it's a case now where your report requires certain attachments, not in an exam scenario, but you can still make reference to these things. Just as with your letter of complaint, you would make reference to receipts or pictures or whatever. So in an exam scenario, you can refer to them. In a real life scenario, you would attach them. So any document findings that provided detailed information, any lists or graphs or tables that you need, perhaps a sales report, so you can actually use a report as part of your report as well. You might have to refer to these attachments and then give a small notation about how it is relevant. Now, ensure that you structure the report so that the most important information comes early. Remember, you might not get the time to finish everything, which we hope will not be the case. But you still want to make sure that whatever you're writing, you start with the main points first, the strong points first, and then you bring it down. Make sure that the paragraphs that follow now support whatever it is you brought up in the first paragraph. So remember, your first paragraph, you would have introduced the issue. You would have said what the purpose of the report is and all of that. So the subsequent paragraphs now are the supporting details. Now, you do not need to be curt, meaning very brief, very abrupt, very abrasive almost. You don't need to be officious. You don't need to be patronizing. So even though you want to be brief, you want to be brief but polite. You want to be brief but well-mannered. You want to be brief but still have a certain level of courtesy involved. So now we're going to see what it is you actually know about reports. So you're going to get a few scenarios. And I want you to think about them for a little bit. And then I want you to tell me, what kind of report would I need to use for this scenario versus that one? So now, here's our first scenario. You need to send out general information to your colleagues or to employees. Which one of these must you use? The formal report or the memorandum? You should know. Remember, one of these is used for public information. One of these is used for things that are not sensitive, that are not personal. One of these is used basically almost like a notice. Which one is it? There it is, a memoranda. So you use memoranda in these contexts in order to just give general information. So nothing that not everyone can see. Here's your next scenario. So now, while on your own business one day, I hope, you witness a theft on the compound. And because you witnessed it, unfortunately, now you're asked to document what you saw. You're not snitching, they're just asking you, what did you see? So if you're going to do that, what should you use? Memorandum, formal report. So think carefully again. You witnessed a theft on the compound, unfortunately. And now because you witnessed it, you have to write about it. So you're going to be submitting it more than likely to a higher ranking person in the business, perhaps even to the police. So what do you think you're supposed to do? You're going to write a formal report, of course. Very good. Now, your company wishes to send a written proposal for a liaison with another company. What document should you use? So let's look at the details now. So your company wants to perhaps merge with another company. Perhaps they have a project they want to work on with another company, whatever the case may be. So they want a liaison. So that liaison can take any different form, any of many different forms. So you are asked to write up this document to send to the company. So your company is Images and Visions, and you want to liaise with Memories and Productions. What are you supposed to write? Do you write a memo and send over there? You sure? Sure? No, you're supposed to write a formal report. Remember we said the memorandum is used inside. So I can send one to somebody else within my organization, who of course is of my rank or below, but I should not take up myself and send a memorandum to another organization. First of all, that looks very impolite, very rude. So it would be a case where if I want to ask this company if they want to merge with us on a special project, as the case may be, I need to send them a formal report, a formal letter format, write to them nicely, use all the different strategies and techniques we discussed last week, and say, hello. Now look at this one. So a meeting was held among the managers of various departments regarding the agenda for a staff Christmas party. We're not really having many of those, but just in case. And in this meeting, they also discussed the dress code. So now, they want to tell everybody what it is that they have decided on. So what should they write? What should they use? So remember now, the managers met. They discussed the party, they discussed the dress code, all the little details. Now they want to inform everyone else in the company of what decisions were taken. So what should they use to get this information across? A formal letter? Perhaps. Is it really necessary to do a formal letter though? You think so? Sure? No. For this type of scenario, you need a memoranda because it's just a general notice that is going to go out to all the members of the different departments and so on. So It is not something that is private. It is not something that is sensitive. It is not something that is personal. It is a general announcement that is being made. So each person can just get their own memorandum. Now look at this one. You need to relay information requested by your manager or supervisor or director. What should you use? So, your manager or your supervisor or your director, depending on where you work, has asked you to go find out some things, some details, and you are now in receipt of this information and you're ready to pass it on to your manager, your supervisor, or your director. What should you do, my dear? Do you write a memorandum? Do you write a formal report? They asked you for the information. You got the information. Now you're ready to give them the information in writing. So, of course, I can write a memo, don't it? You think so? Keep in mind what we said earlier. Unless you're specifically told to create a memorandum, you do not send a memorandum. Unless your boss says to you, John Brown, find this out for me and just write up a memo and leave it on my desk. That's fine because you were instructed to use a memorandum as a response to the request. However, in this scenario, we were missing that little detail. It did say that they requested information. It did say that you're going to send the information. It did not, however, say that you were given permission to use a memorandum. So keep that in mind. So let's recap quickly. So remember, formal reports are for, as the name suggests, formal situations. So when you are writing to someone who is of a higher rank, when you're writing to someone outside of your organization, when you are writing about something that is possibly sensitive, something that is possibly confidential, something personal, you use a formal report. The memorandum, because of its nature, is more or less public. So if you just want to send out a general notice, use a memorandum. If you just want to dispense some information quickly, use a memorandum. But do not use a memorandum if it is something serious. All right, so that's all the time we have for CSEC English Language. You can watch today's lessons again on onespotmedia.com and on JNN between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. Class time resumes tomorrow at 9:45 a.m. right here on TVJ. Until then, keep safe.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.